Hey crew, it's Pitt and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is Isis Unveiled. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find enjoyment in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box below along with the original source material, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. A particular note, again today, is almost certainly going to be the Unconventional Bible Study, 161 videos where I talk about the Bible extensively. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Isis Unveiled with Part 2, Chapter 7. Of the tenets of the Druses, nothing authentic has ever come to light. The popular belief amongst their neighbors is that they adore an idol in the form of a calf, king, the Gnostics, and their remains. O ye lords of truth without fault, who are forever cycling for eternity, save me from the annihilation of this region of the two truths. Egyptian ritual of the dead. Pythagoras correctly regarded the ineffable name of God as the key to the mysteries of the universe. Pan Coast, blue and red light. In the next two chapters, we shall notice the most important of the Christian secret sects, the so-called heresies, which sprang into existence between the 1st and 4th centuries of our era. Glancing rapidly at the Ophites and Nazareans, we shall pass to their scions, which yet exist in Syria and Palestine, under the name of Druses of Mount Lebanon, and near Basra or Bassora in Persia, under that of Mendeans, or disciples of St. John. All these sects have an immediate connection with our subject, for they are of Kabbalistic parentage and have once held to the secret wisdom religion, recognizing as the one supreme, the mystery God of the ineffable name. Noticing the numerous secret societies of the past, we will bring them into direct comparison with several of the modern. We will conclude with a brief survey of the Jesuits and of that venerable nightmare of the Roman Catholic Church, modern Freemasonry. All of these modern as well as ancient fraternities, present Freemasonry excepted, were and are more or less connected with magic, practically as well as theoretically, and every one of them, Freemasonry not accepted, was and still is accused of demonolatry, blasphemy, and licentiousness. We are going to pause and point out, I have dealt in a small measure with Freemasons, right? I haven't dealt with the Druses or the Menadians or these others. I mean, we've talked about the Roman Catholic Church a good bit. And we talked about Freemasonry from the mouth of a Freemason, right? We went, I forget which video it is, but it will be included in the playlist. It's part of the Esoterica playlist, the one that this is on. And we talked about how the Freemasons perform ceremonial magic. They just don't believe in it, which is remarkably stupid. And I give all of the reasons in the other videos, but we'll probably dive into that again today. But if we don't, if this does not lead there, I want to be abundantly clear. You should not be performing ceremonies that you do not believe in. They get in there and they draw shapes with athames. They get in there and they make vows that they don't intend to keep. And that is not a wise idea. And that is just from them, right? I'm not part of the club. I have no desire to be part of the club. I'm interested in the ceremonies and the things like that in a academic sense. I don't. It's not that I don't believe in ceremonial magic. I believe that most of the ceremonial magic is quite honestly just useless. It is directing the energies, yes, and so it will work. But by investing your energy into the ceremony, if you do the ceremony in the slightest bit wrong, it can go awry. What I do is direct. It is moving the energy where it needs to be. It is asking directly for the thing that I want, and it has got nothing to do with drawing pentagrams or 6-pointed stars or 7-pointed stars or upside down stars or drawing crosses or dunking your head in water or any of the things like the blindfolds, all of that. None of that is necessary. And so it is interesting on an academic level, but it's not really something that I invest myself into, other than to talk about you should not be doing things that you don't believe in. If you do not believe in ceremonial magic and you want to be part of this club, you probably shouldn't, right? They are doing ceremonial magic, but they don't believe in the ceremonial magic. And what she's pointing out here is when it says Freemasonry accepted from being connected with magic, that is untrue. That is like literally patently untrue. It is literally part of the rituals that enable you to become a Mason, that you participate in these ceremonial magic. And if you don't believe in it, it doesn't make it any less powerful. It just throws the effects to someone else to manage. When you are performing the magic and you believe in the magic and you are making the magic happen, you are in control of it. If you are participating in someone else's ceremony and you don't believe in it, but they do, they're harvesting your energy and they're putting that to their use. It might be beneficial. It might not. You don't know. So that is where I stand on ceremonial magic. I am not part of these clubs. I have no vow of secrecy. I am not intimately connected with them. I have no interior knowledge other than the things that are available freely online. And we have dealt with some of those, and it was brought to light in those that they do the magic, but they don't believe in it. And I find that remarkably stupid. And there is no way to couch that in particular in love. If you are participating in magic and you don't believe in magic, that is stupid. Back to the text. Our object is not to write the history of either of them, but only to compare these sorely abused communities with the Christian sects, past and present, and then take in historical facts for our guidance, to defend the spirit science as well as the men who are its students and champions against any unjust imputation. It is important to note also that this particular group also participates in ceremonial magic. You may not believe that, but when they wave the incense and they make the incantations, they're casting spells. They don't like you to say that, and we have seen in this particular study that that is absolutely what is going on. So I'm not exempting them from it, right? One by one, the tide of time engulfed the sects of the early centuries, until of the whole number only one survived in its primitive integrity. That one still exists, still teaches the doctrine of its founder, still exemplifies its faith and works of power. The quicksands which swallowed up every other outgrowth of the religious agitation of the times of Jesus, with its records, relics, and traditions, proved firm ground for this. Who are you talking about? Driven from their native land, its members found refuge in Persia, and today the ancient traveler may converse with the direct descendants of the disciples of John, who listened on the Jordan shore to the man sent from God, and were baptized and believed. This curious people, numbering 30,000 or more, are miscalled Christians of St. John, but in fact should be known by their old name of Nazareans, or their new one of Menadaeans. To term them Christians is wholly unwarranted. They neither believe in Jesus as Christ, nor accept his atonement, nor adhere to his church, nor revere its holy scriptures. Neither do they worship the Jehovah God of the Jews and Christians, a circumstance which, of course, proves that their founder, John the Baptist, did not worship him either. And if not, what right has he to place in the Bible or in the portrait gallery of Christian saints? Still further, if Pharaoh was his god and he was a man sent by God, he must have been sent by Lord Pharaoh, and in his name baptized and preached. Now, if Jesus was baptized by John, the inference is that he was baptized according to his own faith. Therefore, Jesus too was a believer in Pharaoh, or Faho as they call him, a conclusion that seems the more warranted by his silence as to the name of his father. And why should the hypothesis that Pharaoh is but one of the many corruptions of Pho, or Pho, as the Tibetans and Chinese call Buddha, appear ridiculous? In the north of Nepal, Buddha is more often called Pho than Buddha. The book Mahawansa shows how early the works of Buddhistic proselytism began in Nepal. And history teaches that Buddhist monks crowded into Syria and Babylon in the century preceding our era, and that Bodhisattva, the alleged Chaldean, was the founder of Sabism, or baptism. What the actual Baptists, ex-el-Mu'tazila, or Nazarenes, do believe is fully set forth in other places, for they are the very Nazarenes of whom we have spoken so much, and from whose codex we have quoted. Persecuted and threatened with annihilation, they took refuge in the Nestorian body, and so allowed themselves to be arbitrarily classed as Christians. But as soon as opportunity offered, they separated, and now, for several centuries, have not even nominally deserved the appellation. That they are, nevertheless, so called by ecclesiastical writers, is perhaps not very difficult to comprehend. They know too much of early Christianity to be left outside the pale, to bear witness against it with their traditions, without the stigma of heresy and backsliding being fastened upon them to weaken confidence in what they might say. But where else can science find so good a field for biblical research as among this too neglected people? No doubt their inheritance of the Baptist doctrine, their traditions, are without a break. What they teach now, their forefathers taught at every epoch where they appear in history. They are the disciples of that John who is said to have foretold the advent of Jesus, baptized him, and declared the latchet of his shoe, he, John, was not worthy to unloose. As they too, the messenger and the Messiah, stood in the Jordan, and the elder was consecrating the younger, his own cousin too, humanly speaking, the heavens opened, and God himself, in the shape of a dove, descended in glory upon this beloved Son. How, then, if this tale be true, can we account for the strange infidelity which we find among these surviving Nazareans? So far from believing Jesus the only begotten Son of God, they actually told the Persian missionaries, who in the 17th century first discovered them to Europeans, that the Christ of the New Testament was a false teacher, and that the Jewish system, as well as that of Jesus, came from the realm of darkness. Who knows better than they? Where can more competent living witnesses be found? Ethiopia? Christian ecclesiastics would force upon us an anointed Savior, heralded by John, and the disciples of this very Baptist from the earliest centuries have stigmatized this ideal personage as an impostor, and his putative father, Jehovah, a spurious god, the Ilda Boath of the Ophites. Unlucky for Christianity will be the day when some fearless and honest scholar shall persuade the elders to let him translate the contents of their secret books and compile their hoary traditions. It is a strange delusion that makes some writers think the Nazareans have no other sacred literature, no other literary relics than 4 doctrinal works, and that curious volume full of astrology and magic which they are bound to peruse at the sunset hour on every soul's day. Sunday. This search after truth leads us, indeed, into devious ways. Many are the obstacles that ecclesiastical cunning has placed in the way of our finding the primal source of religious ideas. Christianity is on trial, and has been, ever since science felt strong enough to act as a public prosecutor. A portion of the case we are drafting in this book. What of truth is there in theology? Through what sects has it been transmitted? Whence was it primarily derived? To answer, we must trace the history of the world religion, alike through the secret Christian sects, as through those of other great religious subdivisions of the race. For the secret doctrine is the truth, and that religion is nearest divine that has contained it with least adulteration. Our search takes us hither and thither, but never aimlessly do we bring sects, widely separated in chronological order, into critical juxtaposition. There is one purpose in our work to be kept constantly in view: the analysis of religious beliefs, and the definition of their descent from the past to the present. What has most blocked the way is Roman Catholicism, and not until the secret principles of this religion are uncovered can we comprehend the iron staff upon which it leans to steady its now tottering steps. We will begin with the Ophites, Nazareans, and the modern Druses. The personal views of the author, as they will be presented in the diagrams, will be most decidedly at variance with the prejudiced speculations of Irenaeus, Theodoret, and Epiphanes, the sainted renegade who sold his brethren, inasmuch as they will reflect the ideas of certain Kabbalists in close relation with the mysterious Druses of Mount Lebanon. The Syrian occults, or spiritualists, as they are sometimes termed, are in possession of a great many ancient manuscripts and gems bearing upon our present subject. The first scheme, that of the Ophites, from the very start, as we have shown, varies from the description given by the Fathers, inasmuch as it makes Bythos, or death, a female emanation, and assigns her a place answering to that of Pleroma, only in a far superior region, whereas the Fathers assure us that the Gnostics gave the name of Bythos to the first cause. As in the Kabbalistic system, it represents the boundless and infinite void within which is concealed in darkness the unknown primal motor of all. It envelops him like a veil. In short, we recognize again the Shekinah, or of the Ein Sof. Alone, the name of Io marks the upper center, or rather the presumed spot where the unknown one may be supposed to dwell. Around the Io runs the legend, Chemic Eam Apiax, the eternal son of Braxix, the central spiritual son of all the Kabbalists, represented in some diagrams of the latter by the circle of Tifereth. From this region of unfathomable depths issues forth a circle formed of spirals, which, in the language of symbolism, means a grand cycle, composed of smaller ones. Coiled within, so as to follow the spirals, lies the serpent, emblem of wisdom and eternity, the dual androgyne. The cycle representing Enoia, or divine mind, and the serpent, the Agathodaimon, Ophis, the shadow of the light. Both were the logoi of the Ophites, or the unity as logos manifesting itself as a double principle of good and evil. For, according to their views, these two principles are immutable and existed from all eternity, and they will ever continue to exist. They are both ends of the scale. We talk about that all of the time. They are the same coin, right? And you're to find the balance. Same as with the virtues and vices. As a matter of fact, good and evil can be considered the eighth of the virtues and vices, because it is encompassing all of the others, right? Good is encompassing the virtues, and evil is encompassing the vices, so it is the eighth step in the eight-step process. This symbol, accounts for the adoration by this sect of the serpent, as the Savior coiled around either the sacramental loaf or a dowel. As a unity, Enoia and Ophis are the logos. When separated, one is the tree of life, spiritual, the other the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Therefore, we find Ophis urging the first human couple, the material production of Ildobeoth, but which owed its spiritual principle to Sophia Achamoth, to eat of the forbidden fruit, though Ophis represents divine wisdom. The serpent, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life are all symbols transplanted from the soil of India. The Asra Maram, the banyan tree, so sacred with the Hindus since Vishnu, during one of his incarnations, reposed under its mighty shade, and there taught humanity, philosophy, and sciences, is called the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. That is not the same thing. I can understand how you could make the mistake, but that is not the same thing. One is talking about two trees, and this is intimating one tree. That is both. That is not the same thing. Under the protective umbrage of this king of the forest, the gurus teach their pupils their first lessons on immortality and initiate them in the mysteries of life and death. The Hava Alim of the sacerdotal college are said in the Chaldean tradition to have taught the sons of men to become like one of them. In the present-day Fo Sho, who lives in the Fo Mayu, or Temple of Buddha, on the top of Kuen Longsang, the great mountain, produces his greatest religious miracles under a tree called in Chinese Song Ming Shu, or the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, for ignorance is death and knowledge alone gives immortality. This marvelous display takes place every 3 years, when an immense concourse of Chinese Buddhists assemble in pilgrimage at the holy place. Elda Bayoth, the son of darkness, and the creator of the material world, was made to inhabit the planet Saturn, which identifies him still more with the Jewish Jehovah, who was Saturn himself, according to the Ophites, and is by them denied his Sinaitic name. From Elda Bayoth emanate 6 spirits, who respectively dwell with their father in the 7 planets. These are Saba, or Mars, Adonai, Sol, or the Sun, Aivo, the Moon, Eloi, Jupiter, Astuphi, Mercury, spirit of water, and Orasios, Venus, spirit of fire. In their functions and description as given, these 7 planets are identical with the Hindu Sapta Loka, the 7 places or spheres, or the superior and inferior worlds, for they represent the Kabbalistic 7 spheres. With the Ophites, they belong to the lower spheres. The monograms of these Gnostic planets are also Buddhistic, the latter differing, albeit slightly, from those of the usual astrological houses. In the explanatory notes which accompany the diagram, the names of Cerinthius, the disciple of Simon Magus, of Menander, and of certain other Gnostics, whose names are not to be met with in the patristic writings, are often mentioned, such as Parcha, Ferho, for instance. The author of the diagram claims, moreover, for his sect the greatest antiquity, bringing forward, as a proof, that their forefathers were the builders of all the Dracontia temples, even of those beyond the great waters. He asserts that the Just One, who was the mouthpiece of the eternal Aeon, Christos, himself sent his disciples into the world, placing them under the double protection of Siege, Silence, the Logos, and Ophis, the Agatho-demon. The author alludes, no doubt, to the favorite expression of Jesus, "Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves." On the diagram, Ophis is represented as the Egyptian Knuphis, or Kneph, called Dracontiae. He appears as a serpent standing erect on his tail with a lion's head, crowned and radiated, and bearing on the point of each ray one of the 7 Greek vowels, symbol of the 7 celestial spheres. This figure is quite familiar to those who are acquainted with the Gnostic gems, and is borrowed from the Egyptian Hermetic books. The description given in Revelation of one like unto the Son of Man, with his 7 stars, and who is the Logos, is another form of Ophis. The Nazarene diagram, except in a change of names, is identical with that of the Gnostics, who evidently borrowed their ideas from it. Adding a few appellations from the Basilidian and Valentinian systems. To avoid repetition, we will now simply present the 2 in parallel. Thus we find that in the Nazarene cosmogony, the names of their powers and genii stand in the following relation to those of the Gnostics. All right, so I'm going to read through Nazarene first, and then we will do Gnostic Ophite instead of trying to do it like yesterday. It got a little confusing. So, Nazarene, First Trinity. Lord Pharaoh, the life of which is no life, the supreme God, the cause which produces the light and or the logos in abscontio, the waters of Jordanus Maximus, the waters of life, or ajar, the feminine principle, unity in a trinity, enclosed with the Ish Emon. Second Trinity, the manifestation of the first, Lord Mano, the king of life and light, Rex Lucis, first life, or the primitive man. Lord Jordan, manifestation or emanation of Jordan Maximus, the waters of grace, second life. The superior father, Abitur, third life. The Trinity produces also a duad, Lord Lethio and Fetahil, the genius. The former, the perfect emanation, the latter, imperfect. Lord Jordan, the Lord of all Jordans, manifest netubto, or faith without works. Okay, now, that was the Nazarene. Here is the Gnostic Ophite. First, unity in a trinity. Io, the ineffable name of the unknown deity, Abraxas, and the eternal spiritual Son. Unity enclosed within the depths, Bythos, feminine principle, the boundless circle, within which lie all ideal forms. From this unity emanates the Second Trinity, Item. Ennoia, mind, Ophis, the agatho-demon, Sophia androgyne, wisdom, who in her turn, fecundated with the divine light, produces Christos and Sophia Achamoth, one perfect, the other imperfect, as an emanation. Sophia Achamoth emanates Ilda Baoth, the demiurge, who produces material and soulless creation, works without faith or grace. Moreover, the Ophite seven planetary genii, who emanated from one from the other, are found again in the Nazarene religion under the name of the seven impostor demons, or stellars, who will deceive all the sons of Adam. These are Sol, Spiritus Veneris, Holy Spirit in her material aspect, the mother of the seven badly disposed stellars, answering to the Gnostic Achamoth, Nebu, or miracle, a false messiah who will deprave the ancient worship of God. Sin, or Luna, or Shurel, Kiun, Kivan, or Saturn, Bel Jupiter, and the seventh Nereg, Mars. Codex Nazareus, page 57. The Christos of the Gnostics is the chief of the seven eons, St. John's, seven spirits of God. The Nazarenes have also their seven genii, or good eons, whose chief is Rex Lucis, Mano, their Christos. The Saptarishis, the seven sages of India, inhabit the Saptapura, or the seven celestial cities. What less or more do we find in the universal ecclesia until the days of the Reformation, and in the Popish Church after the separation? We have compared the relative value of the Hindu cosmogony, the Chaldeo, Zoroastrian, Jewish Kabbalah, and that of the so-termed heretics. A correct diagram of the Judaico-Christian religion, to enforce which, on the heathen who have furnished it, are expended such great sums every year, would still better prove the identity of the two. But we lack space, and are also spared the necessity of proving what is already thoroughly demonstrated. In the Ophite Gems of King, Gnostics, we find the name of Io repeated and often confounded with that of Ivo, while the latter simply represents one of the genii antagonistic to Abraxas. In order that these names may not be taken as identical with the name of the Jewish Jehovah, we will at once explain this word. It seems to us surpassingly strange that so many learned archaeologists would have so little insisted that there was more than one Jehovah, and disclaimed that the name originated with Moses. Io is certainly the title of a supreme being, and belongs partially to the ineffable name, but it neither originated with, nor was it the sole property of, the Jews. even if it had pleased Moses to bestow the name upon the tutelar spirit, the alleged protector and national deity of the chosen people of Israel, there is yet no possible reason why other nationalities should receive him as the highest and one living God. But we deny the assumption altogether. Besides, there is the fact that Yeho, or Io, was a mystery name from the beginning. These two names never came into use before King David. There was a lot didn't come into use before King David. Anterior to his time, few or no proper names were compounded with Aya or Yah. It looks rather as though David, being a sojourner among the Tyrians and Philistines, brought thence the name of Jehovah. Sojourner. That's an interesting way to put that, right? He was exiled from Israel. That's what happened, and then he was kicked out from the Tyrians. That's what happened. And then David went and was a brigand and a vagabond in his own land. He was somebody that was greatly feared in the land of Israel, in Judea in particular. He was a strong arm who was extorting people for safety. He was a mob boss, so to speak. And so it is interesting to see this spin on this in particular. The sojourner among the two. That's funny. He made Zadok high priest, from whom came the Zadokites, or Sadducees. He lived and ruled first at Hebron. That is absolutely true. That's what you want to know why? Most people don't know this. If you're a Christian, I bet you don't know this. That's because until David, they didn't have control of Jerusalem. The original peoples maintained control of Jerusalem all the way from the time of Joshua until David. That's interesting to note, isn't it? For the holy city of God, they didn't get it for a very, very long time. Hebron, or Kabir town, where the rites of the four mystery gods were celebrated. Hebron was a much more important target to the figures of the Bible if you actually read through what is contained in Exodus and Samuel. You will notice that Hebron is the emphasized city. That is the city where people actually wanted. The rest of it just came along with it. Hebron was where they were trying to get. And it is south of Jerusalem. Neither David nor Solomon recognized either Moses or the law of Moses. That is for sure true. Nor did they recognize the God of Israel. They aspired to build a temple to this name, like the structures erected by Hiram to Hercules and Venus. This is entirely a myth. There is no physical record of that. Isn't that funny? Adon and Astarte says first, the very ancient name of God, Yahweh, written in the Greek Io, appears, apart from its derivation, to have been an old mystic name of the supreme deity of the Shemites. Hence it was told to Moses, when initiated at Horeb, the cave, under the distinct direction of Jethro, the Kenite or Canaanite priest of Midian. There's a lot there. In an old religion of the Chaldeans, whose remains are to be found amongst the Neoplatonists, the highest divinity enthroned above the seven heavens, representing the spiritual light principle, Nous, and also conceived as Demiurgus, was called Io, who was, like the Hebrew Yahweh, mysterious and unmentionable, and whose name was communicated to the initiated. The Phoenicians had a supreme god whose name was trilateral and secret, and he was Io. It is important to note that it is my personal estimation that Moses did not come from Egypt, that most likely he came from Midian. When he was expelled from Egypt because he killed the guy who was harming a Jew, and he got caught and he ran off, right? He ran off into the desert, taking no accountability. He just booked out. And then the next thing you hear about him, he's dealing with his father-in-law, Jethro, who just happens to be a priest of Midian. And you know who else did magic? The priest of Midian. They had a magical system, just like the Egyptians did, just like the Babylonians did. They were able to do magic. And then he left the priest of Midian, who was Jethro, and he went back to Egypt, to free his people by performing these magical acts that they could also perform in Egypt. Now, there's a lot that passes in between there, but they wind up back in Midian when they leave Egypt. That's where they wind up. They go there, and that's because I believe Sinai is contained in the land of Midian. See the Unconventional Bible Study. And then Moses gets a guide who happens to be Midian's to lead him through the desert because they can't go. Their original plan was to attack in this direction, and they got rebuffed. And so they went back to Midian, and they picked up a couple of guides who led them through the desert to a place that was a little bit more vulnerable. And then they went and they took over that particular place, right? They killed the people who lived there. And then Moses did something very interesting. You want to know what it was? He sent warriors, including Joshua, back to eliminate the Midians, the people who had helped him, the people who trained him in magic, in my estimation, and the people who led him through the desert. According to the Bible, these people led him through the desert, not the pillar of fire. I understand that's in there too. The people of Midian guided them through the desert and kept them safe from troubles. And then they went back and they just completely wiped out Midian because you can't have witnesses. You can't have witnesses if you're setting up a strong-arm situation. You just can't do it. And if any of that offended you, you have not been through the Bible study because all of that is explained in extreme detail as we go through Exodus. It's only the second book. Back to the text. But while first insists that the name has a Semitic origin, there are other scholars who trace it further than he does and look back beyond the classification of the Caucasians. In Sanskrit, we have Ya or Ya, Yaya, or Ya or Yaga. And this throws light on the origin of the famous festival of the car of Jagannath, commonly called Juggernaut. Yahweh means he who is, and Dr. Spiegel traces even the Persian name of God, Ahura, to the root A, which is in Sanskrit pronounced as As, to breathe, and Asu, became. Therefore, in time, synonymous with spirit. Rawlinson strongly supports the opinion of an Aryan or Vedic influence on the early Babylonian mythology. We have given, a few pages back, the strongest possible proofs of the identity of Vishnu with Dagon. The same may be added for the title of Io, and its Sanskrit root traced in every country. Yu, or Yovas, is the oldest Latin name for God. As male, he is Yu-Pitar, or Yu, the father, Pitar being Sanskrit for father. As feminine, You-No, or Yu, the comforter, being the Phoenician word for rest and comfort. Professor Max Muller shows that although Dyasis, sky, does not appear as a masculine in the ordinary Sanskrit, yet it does occur in the Veda, and thus bear witness to the early Aryan worship of Dios, the Greek Zeus. To grasp the real and primitive sense of the term Io, and the reason for its becoming the designation for the most mysterious of all deities, we must search for its origin in the figurative phraseology of all primitive people. We must, first of all, go to the most ancient sources for our information. In one of the books of Hermes, for instance, we find him saying that the number 10 is the mother of the soul, and that the life and light are therein united. For the number 1 is born from the spirit, and the number 10 from matter. The unity has made the 10 the unity. We have dealt with the books of Hermes in the ancient lore playlist. The Kabbalistic gematria, one of the methods for extracting the hidden meanings from letters, words, and sentences, is arithmetical. I want to point out here that I give no value whatsoever to gematria. I believe in numerology to a very small degree. I believe that there are important numbers. That is absolutely true. 138, number of manifestation. I believe that there are numbers as signs even. If you see 222, that means it's time to make a decision. If you see 333, it is time to learn about something. And if it is 444, it's time to go and do. These things are true for the most part, in my estimation. But once you get into complicated mathematics, you're just doing it wrong. There is too much that can be subjective in that particular thing, right? Seeing 222 flash on a clock, and then you see it independently somewhere else, there's probably a message there. If you have to take this name and add up all of the individual little pieces to find a number, to match that number to a concept or to something else, it is too complicated, and it is not going to be true almost ever. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, and 10,000 or a million monkeys on a million typewriters turning out the works of Shakespeare. That's a possibility, right? These numbers can be correct every once in a while, but for the most part, they are absolutely fucking not. And so I don't put any real weight into gematria. I do into numbers in the instances what we talk about. But if you're having to do too much arithmetic, you're just simply doing it wrong. It consists in applying to the letters of a word the sense they bear as numbers, in outward shape as well as in their individual sense. Moreover, by the themura, another method used by the Kabbalist, any word could be made to yield its mystery out of its anagram. Thus, we find one author of Sefer Jazira saying, 1 or 2 centuries before our era, 1. The spirit of the Alahim of lives. So again, in the oldest Kabbalistic diagrams, the 10 Sephiroth are represented as wheels or circles, and Adam Kadmon, the primitive man, as an upright pillar. Wheels and seraphim are holy creatures, and the holy creatures, Chioth, says Rabbi Akiba. And another system of the same branch of symbolical Kabbalah, called Athbach, which arranges the letters of the alphabet by pairs in 3 rows. All of the couples in the first row bear the numerical value 10. And in the system of Simon Simeon ben Shittah, the uppermost couple, the most sacred of all, is preceded by the Pythagorean cipher, 1 and a naught, or 0, 10. See? Too complicated. You're just doing too much. That happens all of the time. If we can, once, appreciate the fact that among all the peoples of the highest antiquity, the most natural conception of the first cause manifesting itself in its creatures, and that to this they could not but ascribe the creation of all, was that of an androgyne deity, that the male principle was considered the vivifying invisible spirit, and the female, Mother Nature, we shall be enabled to understand how that mysterious cause came to, at first, to be represented, in the picture writings perhaps, as the combination of alpha and omega of numbers, a decimal, then, as Io, a trilateral name, containing in itself a deep allegory. Io, in such a case, would, etymologically considered, mean the breath of life, generated or springing forth between an upright male and an egg-shaped female, principle of nature. For in Sanskrit, as means to be, to live or exist, and originally it meant to breathe. From it, says Max Muller, in its original sense of breathing, the Hindus formed Asu, breath, and Asura, the name of God, whether it meant the breathing one or the giver of breath. It certainly meant the latter. In Hebrew, and mean life. Cornelius Agrippa, in his treatise on the preeminence of woman, shows that. The word Eve suggests comparison with the mystical symbols of the Kabbalist, the name of the woman having affinity with the ineffable Tetragrammaton, the most sacred name of the divinity. Ancient names were always consonant with the things they represented, in relation to the mysterious name of the deity in question, and hitherto inexplicable hint of the Kabbalist as to the efficacy of the letter H, which Abram took away from his wife Sarah, and put into the middle of his own name, becomes clear. It may perhaps be argued, by way of objection, that it is not ascertained, as yet, at what period of antiquity the naught occurs for the first time in Indian manuscripts or inscriptions. Be that as it may, the case presents circumstantial evidence of too strong a character not to carry a conviction of probability with it. According to Max Muller, the two words cipher and zero, which are in reality but one, are sufficient to prove that our figures are borrowed from the Arabs. Cipher is the Arabic sifron and means empty, a translation of the Sanskrit name of the knot, Sainya, he says. The Arabs had their figures from Hindustan and never claimed the discovery for themselves. As to the Pythagoreans, we need but turn to the ancient manuscripts of Boethius's geometry, composed in the 6th century, to find the Pythagorean numerals, the 1 and the naught, as the first and final cipher. And Porphyry, who quotes from the Pythagorean Moderatus, says that the numerals of the Pythagoras were hieroglyphical symbols, by means whereof he explained ideas concerning the nature of things. Now, if the most ancient Indian manuscripts show as yet no trace of decimal notation in them, Max Muller states very clearly that until now he has found but 9 letters, the initials of the Sanskrit numerals, in them. On the other hand, we have records as ancient as to supply the wanted proof. We speak of the sculptures and the sacred imagery in the most ancient temples in the Far East. Pythagoras derived his knowledge from India, and we find Professor Max Muller corroborating this statement, at least so far as allowing the Neo-Pythagoreans to have been the first teachers of ciphering among the Greeks and Romans. That they, at Alexandria or in Syria, became acquainted with the Indian figures and adapted them to the Pythagorean abacus, or figures. This cautious allowance only implies that Pythagoras himself was acquainted with but 9 figures, so that we might reasonably answer that, although we possess no certain proof that the decimal notation was known to Pythagoras, who lived in the very close of the archaic ages, we have yet sufficient evidence to show that the full numbers, as given by Boethius, were known to Pythagoreans, even before Alexandria was built. The evidence we find in Aristotle, who says that some philosophers hold that ideas and numbers are of the same nature and amount to 10 in all. This, we believe, will be sufficient to show that the decimal notation was known among them at least as early as 4 centuries BC, for Aristotle does not seem to treat the question as an innovation of the Neo-Pythagoreans. Besides, as we have remarked above, the representations of the archaic deities on the walls of the temples are themselves quite suggestive enough. So, for instance, Vishnu is representing the Karmavatara, his second avatar, as a tortoise sustaining a circular pillar on which the semblance of himself, Maya, or the illusion, sits with all his attributes. While one hand holds a flower, another a club, a third a shell, the fourth, generally the upper one or at the right, holds on his forefinger extended as the cipher 1, the chakra or discus, which resembles a ring or a wheel, and might be taken for the knot. In his first avatar, the Matsaya Vatam, when emerging from the fish's mouth, he is represented in the same position. The 10-armed Durga of Bengal, the 10-headed Ravana, the giant Parvati, as Durga, Indra, and Indrani, are found with this attribute, which is a perfect representation of the maypole. The holiest of the temples among the Hindus are those of Jagannath. This deity is worshipped equally by all the sects of India, and Jagannath is named the Lord of the world. He is the god of the mysteries, and his temples, which are the most numerous in Bengal, are all of a pyramidal form. There is no other deity which affords such a variety of etymologies as Io, nor a name which can be so variously pronounced. It is only by associating it with the Masoretic points that the latter rabbins succeeded in making Jehovah read Adonai, or Lord. Philobibulus spells it with Greek letters, Ieo, Ievo. Theodoret says that the Samaritans pronounced it Iabe, Yahweh, and the Jews Yahoo, which would make it sorry, as we have shown, I-A-O. Diodorus states that, among the Jews, they relate that Moses called the god Io. It is on the authority of the Bible itself, therefore, that we maintain that before his initiation by Jethro, his father-in-law, Moses had never known the word Io. The future deity of the sons of Israel calls out from the burning bush and gives his name as I am that I am. He specifies carefully that he is the Lord God of the Hebrews, Exodus 3:18, not of the other nations. Judging him by his own acts throughout the Jewish records, we doubt whether Christ himself, had he appeared in the days of the Exodus, would have been welcomed by the irascible Sinaitic deity. That is true. However, the Lord God, who becomes, on his own confession, Jehovah only in the 6th chapter of Exodus, verse 3, finds his veracity put to a startling test in Genesis 22:14, in which revealed passage Abraham builds an altar to Jehovah Jireh. It would seem, therefore, but natural to make a difference between the mystery god, Io, adopted from the highest antiquity by all who participated in the esoteric knowledge of the priest, and his phonetic counterparts, whom we find treated with so little reverence by the Ophites and other Gnostics. Once, having burdened themselves, like the Azazel of the wilderness, with the sins and iniquities of the Jewish nation, it now appears hard for the Christians to have to confess that those whom they thought fit to consider the chosen people of God, their sole predecessors in monotheism, were, till a very late period, as idolatrous and polytheistic as their neighbors. That is revealed by the Bible as well. The shrewd Talmudists have escaped the accusation for long centuries by screening themselves behind the Masoretic invention. But, as in everything else, truth was at last brought to light. We now know that Io must be read Iho, or Aya, not Jehovah. Aya, of the Hebrews, is plainly the Iakos, Bacchus, of the mysteries, the god from whom the liberation of souls was expected. Dionysus, Iakos, Ioha, Aya. Aristotle was then right when he said Io was Oromacides, and Ahriman, Pluto, for the god of heaven. Ahura Mazda rides on a chariot which the horse of the sun follows. And Dunlop quotes Psalm 68:4, which reads, Praise him by his name, Ayach, who rides upon the heavens as on a horse. And then shows that the Arabs represented Ayuk by a horse, the horse of the sun, Dionysus. Aya is a softening of Ayak, he explains, k and h interchange, so s softens to h. Hebrews express the idea of life both by a k and a h, as kiak, to be, haya, to be, ayak, God of life, aya, I am. Well then, may we repeat these lines of Ausenius. Agugia calls me Bacchus, Egypt thinks me Osiris, the Museans name me Phananax, the Indi consider me Dionysus, the Roman mysteries call me Liber, the Arabian race Adonis, and the chosen people Adonai and Jehovah, we may add. How little of the philosophy of the old secret doctrine was understood is illustrated in the atrocious persecutions by the Templars by the Church, and in the accusation of their worshipping the devil under the shape of the goat Baphomet. Without going into the old Masonic mysteries, there is not a Mason, of those we mean who do know something, but has an idea of the true relation of Baphomet bore to Azazel, the scapegoat of the wilderness, whose character and meaning are entirely perverted in the Christian translations. This terrible and venerable name of God, says Lancey, librarian to the Vatican, through the pen of biblical glosses has been a devil, a mountain, a wilderness, and a he-goat. In Mackenzie's Royal Masonic Cyclopedia, the author very correctly reports that this word should be divided into Azaz and El, for it signifies God of victory, but is here used in the sense of author of death, in contrast to Jehovah, the author of life. The latter received a dead goat as an offering. The Hindu Trinity is composed of 3 personages, which are convertible into one. The Trimurti is one, and in its abstraction, indivisible. And yet we see a metaphysical division taking place from the first, and while Brahma, though collectively representing the 3, remains behind the scenes, Vishnu is the life-giver, the creator, and the preserver, and Siva is the destroyer, and the death-giving deity. Death to the life-giver, life to the death-dealer. The symbolical antithesis is grand and beautiful, says Glidden. Deus et demon inversus of the Kabbalists now becomes clear. It is but the intense and cruel desire to crush out the last vestige of the old philosophies by perverting their meaning, for fear that their own dogmas should not be rightly fathered on them, which impels the Catholic Church to carry on such a systematic persecution in regard to Gnostics, Kabbalists, and even the comparatively innocent Masons. Alas, alas, how little has the divine seed, scattered broadcast by the hands of the meek Judean philosopher, thrived or brought forth fruit. He, who himself had shunned hypocrisy, warned against public prayer, showing such contempt for any useless exhibition of the same. Could he but cast a sorrowful glance on the earth from the regions of eternal bliss, he would see that this seed fell neither on sterile rock nor by the wayside. Nay, it took deep root in the most prolific soil, one enriched even to plethora with lies and human gore. For if the truth of God hath more abounded through my lie unto his glory, why yet am I also judged as a sinner? Naively inquires Paul, the best and sincerest of all the apostles. What? That is insane. And then he adds, let us do evil, that good may come. And again, I must point out that Paul had no direct relation to Jesus whatsoever. There was a spiritual experience, and I do not discount that fully, right? But he did not ever once meet Jesus in person. And he was in a direct contention with every single apostle who did study with Jesus. He was in direct contention. They were at loggerheads. They did not see doctrinally eye to eye at all. And so, in order to say that he was the best and sincerest of all the apostles, that is wild to me, right? Absolutely wild. I understand that the Bible was given to him, basically, in the letters and the epistles and all of that, but it doesn't change the fact that he never once met Christ in reality, in the flesh. He met a spiritual being. I don't discount that, but so did Abraham, and that didn't turn out so well. This is a confession which we are asked to believe as having been a direct inspiration from God. It explains, if it does not excuse, the maxim adopted later by the Church that it is an act of virtue to deceive and lie, when by such means the interest of the Church might be promoted. Wow. Thou shalt not bear false witness has nothing to do with the Catholic Church. A maxim applied in its fullest sense by that accomplished professor in forgery, the Armenian Eusebius, or yet that innocent-looking Bible kaleidoscopist Irenaeus. And these men were followed by a whole army of pious assassins, who, in the meanwhile, had improved upon the system of deceit, by proclaiming that it was lawful even to kill, when by murder they could enforce the new religion. Look at there, another commandment. Theophilus, that that perpetual enemy of peace and virtue, as the famous bishop was called. Cyril, Athanasius, the murderer of Arius, and a host of other canonized saints were all but too worthy successors of Saint Constantine, who drowned his wife in boiling water, butchered his little nephew, murdered with his own pious hand 2 of his brothers-in-law, killed his own son Crispus, bled to death several men and women, and smothered in a well an old monk. However, we are told by Eusebius that this Christian emperor was rewarded by a vision of Christ himself bearing his cross, who instructed him to march to other triumphs, inasmuch as he would always protect him. It is important to note that the God of Israel only rewarded death. It only rewarded the sacrifice of blood. Right? If you go back and look, as we did in the Bible study, it was not simple sacrifices that were rewarded. It was grand sacrifices with much death and sacrifice. The least amount of death that was an acceptable sacrifice was when all of the Israelites were required to cut off a piece of their penis and to put it in a hill. And then they created a hill so tall of cut off penis parts that they named the place and forever remained with the name. That was right before they went and started killing and murdering innocent people who were occupying the land in peace that they had decided that God had given to them. Shortly after, they had just killed all of the Midianites for helping them. Right? The God of Israel rewards only death and destruction. It is under the shade of the imperial standard, with its famous sign, in hoc signo vinces, that visionary Christianity, which had crept on since the days of Irenaeus, arrogantly proclaimed its rights in the full blaze of the sun. The Liberium had most probably furnished the model for the true cross, which was miraculously and agreeably to the imperial will, found a few years later. Nothing short of such a remarkable vision, impiously doubted by some severe critics, Dr. Lardner for one, and a fresh miracle to match, could have resulted in the finding of a cross where there had never before been one. Still, we have either to believe the phenomena or dispute it at the risk of being treated as infidels, and this, notwithstanding that upon a careful computation, we would find the fragments of the true cross had multiplied themselves even more miraculously than the 5 loaves in the invisible bakery and the 2 fishes. In all cases like this, where miracles can be so conveniently called in, there is no room for dull fact. History must step out that fiction may step in. If the alleged founder of the Christian religion is now, after the lapse of 19 centuries, preached, more or less unsuccessfully, however, in every corner of the globe, we are at liberty to think that the doctrines attributed to him would astonish and dismay him more than anyone else. A system of deliberate falsification was adapted from the first by Paul. How determined Irenaeus was to crush truth and build up a church of his own on the mangled remains of the 7 primitive churches mentioned in the Revelation must be inferred from his quarrel with Ptolemaeus. And this is again a case of evidence against which no blind faith can prevail. Ecclesiastical history assures us that Christ's ministry was but of 3 years' duration. There is a decided discrepancy on this point between the first 3 synoptics and the 4th gospel, but it was left for Irenaeus to show to Christian posterity that so early as AD 180, the probable time when this father wrote his works against the heresies, even such pillars as the church as himself either knew nothing certain about it, or deliberately lied and falsified dates to support their own views. So anxious was the worthy father to meet every possible objection against his plans that no falsehood, no sophistry was too much for him. How are we to understand the following, and who is the falsifier in this case? The argument of Ptolemaeus was that Jesus was too young to have taught anything of much importance, adding that Christ preached for 1 year only, and then suffered in the 12th month. In this, Ptolemaeus was very little at variance with the Gospels, but Irenaeus carried by his object far beyond the limits of prudence, from a mere discrepancy between 1 and 3 years, makes it 10 and even 20 years, destroying his, Christ's, whole work and robbing him of that age which is both necessary and more honorable than any other, that more advanced age, during which also, as a teacher, he excelled all others. And then, having no certain data to furnish, he throws himself back on tradition and claims that Christ had preached for over 10 years. In another place, he makes Jesus 50 years old. But we must proceed in our work of showing the various origins of Christianity, as also the sources from which Jesus derived his own ideas of God and humanity. The Coenobi lived in Egypt, where Jesus passed his early youth. They were usually confounded with the Therapeutae, who were a branch of this widely spread society. Such is the opinion of Godfrey Higgins and D. Rebold. After the downfall of the principal sanctuaries, which had already begun in the days of Plato, the many different sects, such as the Gymnosophist and the Magi, from whom Clerichus was erroneously derived the former, the Pythagoreans, the Sufis, and the Rishis of Kashmir, instituted a kind of international and universal Freemasonry among their esoteric societies. These Rashis, says Higgins, are the Essenians, Carmelites or Nazarites of the temple. That occult science known by ancient priests under the name of regenerating fire, says Father Rebold, a science that for more than 3,000 years was the peculiar possession of the Indian and Egyptian priesthood, into the knowledge of which Moses was initiated at Heliopolis, where he was educated, and Jesus among the Essenian priests of Egypt or Judea, and by which these two great reformers, particularly the latter, wrought many of the miracles mentioned in the Scriptures. Plato states that the mystic Magian religion, known under the name of Macagistia, is the most uncorrupted form of worship in things divine. Later, the mysteries of the Chaldean sanctuaries were added to it by one of the Zoroasters and Darius Hystaspes. The latter completed and perfected it still more with the help of the knowledge obtained by him from the learned ascetics of India, whose rites were identical with those of the initiated Magi. Amian, in his history of Julian's Persian expedition, gives the story by stating that one day Hystaspes, as he was boldly penetrating into the unknown regions of Upper India, had come upon a certain wooded solitude, the tranquil recesses of which were occupied by those exalted sages, the Brahmans, or shamans, instructed by their teaching in the science of the motions of the world and of the heavenly bodies, and in pure religious rites. He transfused them into the creed of the Magi. The latter, coupling with these doctrines of their own peculiar science of foretelling the future, have handed down the whole through their descendants to succeeding ages. It is from these descendants that the Sufis, chiefly composed of Persians and Syrians, acquired their proficient knowledge in astrology, medicine, and the esoteric doctrine of the ages. The Sufi doctrine, says C.W. King, involved the grand idea of one universal creed which could be secretly held under any profession of an outward faith, and in fact took virtually the same view of religious systems as that in which the ancient philosophers had regarded such matters. The mysterious Druzes of Mount Lebanon are the descendants of all of these. Solitary Copts, earnest students scattered hither and thither throughout the sandy solitudes of Egypt, Arabia, Petraea, Palestine, and the impenetrable forces of Abyssinia, though rarely met with, may sometimes be seen. Many and various are the nationalities to which belong the disciples of that mysterious school, and many the side shoots of that one primitive stock. The secrecy preserved by these sub-lodges, as well as by the one and supreme Great Lodge, has ever been proportionate to the activity of religious persecutions, and now, in the face of the growing materialism, their very existence is becoming a mystery. But it must not be inferred, on that account, that such a mysterious brotherhood is but a fiction, not even a name, though it remains unknown to this day. Whether its affiliates are called by an Egyptian, Hindu, or Persian name, it matters not. Persons belonging to one of these sub-brotherhoods have been met by trustworthy and not unknown persons, besides the present writer, who states a few facts concerning them by the special permission of one who has a right to give it. In a recent and very valuable work on secret societies, K.R.H. Mackenzie's Royal Masonic Cyclopedia, we find the learned author himself, an honorary member of the Canongate Kilwinning Lodge, No. 2, Scotland, and a Mason not likely to be imposed upon, stating the following under the head, Hermetic Brothers of Egypt. An occult fraternity which has endured from very ancient times, having a hierarchy of officers, secret signs and passwords, and a peculiar method of instruction in science, religion, and philosophy. If we may believe those who at the present time profess to belong to it, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, the art of invisibility, and the power of communication directly with the ultramundane life are part of the inheritance they possess. The writer has met with only 3 persons who maintain the actual existence of this body of religious philosophers, and who hinted that they themselves were actually members. There was no reason to doubt the good faith of these individuals, apparently unknown to each other, and men of moderate competence, blameless lives, austere manners, and almost ascetic in their habits. They all appeared to be men of 40 to 45 years of age, and evidently of vast erudition. Their knowledge of languages, not to be doubted. They never remained long in one country, but passed away without creating notice. Another of such sub-brotherhoods is the sect of the Petries in India. Known by name, now that Jacoliot has brought it into public notice, it yet is more arcane, perhaps, than the brotherhood that Mackenzie names the Hermetic Brothers. What Jacoliot learned of it was from fragmentary manuscripts delivered to him by Brahmins, who had their reasons for doing so, we must believe. The Agrauchata Parikashai gives certain details about the association, as it was in the days of old, and, when explaining mystic rites and magical incantations, explains nothing at all, so that the mystic Lom, Lorum, Shorum, and Shorem Ramaya Namaya remain, for the mystified writer, as much a puzzle as ever. To do him justice, though, he fully admits the fact and does not enter upon useless speculations. Whoever desires to assure himself that there now exists a religion which has baffled for centuries the impudent inquisitiveness of missionaries, the persevering inquiry of science, let him violate, if he can, the seclusion of the Syrian Druzes. He will find them numbering over 80,000 warriors, scattered from the plain east of Damascus to the western coast. They covet no proselytes, shun notoriety, keep friendly as far as possible with both Christians and Mohammedans, respect the religion of every other sect or people, but will never disclose their own secrets. Vainly do the missionaries stigmatize them as infidels, idolaters, brigands, and thieves. Neither threat, bribe, nor any other consideration will ever induce a Druze to become a convert to dogmatic Christianity. We have heard of 2 in 50 years, and both have finished their careers in prison for drunkenness and theft. They proved to be real Druzes, said one of their chiefs, discussing the subject. There never was a case of an initiated Druze becoming a Christian. As to the uninitiated, they were never allowed to even see the sacred writings, and none of them have the remotest idea where these are kept. There are missionaries in Syria who boast of having in their possession a few copies. The volumes alleged to be the correct expositions from these secret books, such as the translation by Baptiste de la Croix in 1701 from the works presented by Nasir Allah to the French king, are nothing more than a compilation of secrets known more or less to every inhabitant of the southern ranges of Lebanon and Anti-Libanus. They were the work of an apostate dervish who was expelled from the sect Hanafi for improper conduct. The embezzlement of money of widows and orphans. The Exposé de la Religion des Druzes in 2 volumes by Sylvestre de Sacy, 1828, is another network of hypotheses. A copy of this work was to be found in 1870 on the windowsill of one of their principal halloi, or place of religious meeting. To the inquisitive question of an English traveler as to their rites, the Okal, a venerable old man who spoke English as well as French, opened the volume of de Sacy, and offering it to his interlocutor, remarked with a benevolent smile, "Read this instructive and truthful book. I could explain to you neither better nor more correctly the secrets of God and our blessed Hamsa than it does." The traveler understood the hint. Mackenzie says they settled at Lebanon about the 10th century and seemed to be a mixture of Kurds, Mahdi Arabs, and other semi-civilized tribes. Their religion is compounded of Judaism, Christianity, and Mohammedanism. They have a regular order of priesthoods and a kind of hierarchy. There is a regular system of passwords and signs. 12 months probation, to which either sex is admitted, preceded initiation. We quote the above only to show how little even persons as trustworthy as Mr. Mackenzie really knows of these mystics. Mosheim, who knows as much, or we should say rather as little, as any others, is entitled to the merit of candidly admitting that their religion is peculiar to themselves and is involved in some mystery. We should say it was, rather. That their religion exhibits traces of Magianism and Gnosticism is natural, as the whole of the Ophite esoteric philosophy is at the bottom of it. But the characteristic dogma of the Druzes is the absolute unity of God. He is the essence of life, and although incomprehensible and invisible, is to be known through occasional manifestations in human form. Like the Hindus, they hold that he was incarnated more than once on earth. Hamsa was the precursor of the last manifestation to be, the 10th avatar, not the inheritor of Hakim, who is yet to come. Hamsa was the personification of the universal wisdom. Bohayadin, in his writings, calls him Messiah. The whole number of his disciples, or those who at different ages of the world have imparted wisdom to mankind, which the latter as invariably have forgotten and rejected in course of time, is 164, the Kabbalistic SDK. Therefore, their stages or degrees of promotion after initiation are 5. The first 3 degrees are typified by the 3 feet of the candlestick of the inner sanctuary, which hold the light of the 5 elements. The last 2 degrees, the most important and terrifying in their solemn grandeur, belonging to the highest orders, and the whole 5 degrees emblematically represent the said 5 mystic elements. The 3 feet are the holy application, the opening, and the phantom, says one of their books, on man's inner and outer soul, and his body a phantom, a passing shadow. The body, or matter, is also called the rival, for he is the minister of sin, the devil, ever creating dissensions between the heavenly intelligence, spirit, and the soul, which he tempts incessantly. Their ideas on transmigration are Pythagorean and Kabbalistic. The spirit, or Timiyami, the divine soul, was in Elijah and John the Baptist, and the soul of Jesus was that of Hamsa, that is to say, of the same degree of purity and sanctity. Until the resurrection, by which they understand the day when the spiritual bodies of men will be absorbed into God's own essence and being, the nirvana of the Hindus. The souls of men will keep their astral forms, except a few chosen ones who, from the moment of their separation from the bodies, begin to exist as pure spirits. The life of man they divide into soul, body, and intelligence, or mind. It is the latter which imparts and communicates the soul, the divine spark, from its Hamsa, Christos. They have 7 great commandments, which are imparted equally to all the uninitiated. And yet, even these well-known articles of faith have been so mixed up in the accounts of outside writers that, in one of the best cyclopedias of America, Appleton's, they are garbled after the fashion that may be seen in the comparative tabulation below. The spurious and the true order parallel. We will read through the one on the left first and then come back for the one on the right. The correct version of the commandments as imparted orally by the teachers. 1. The unity of God, or the infinite oneness of deity. 2. The essential excellence of truth. 3. Toleration, right given to all men and women to freely express their opinions on religious matters and make the latter subservient to reason. 4. Respect all men and women according to their character and conduct. 5. Entire submission to God's decrees. 6. Chastity of body, mind, and soul. 7. Mutual help under all conditions. The garbled version reported by the Christian missionaries and given in pretended expositions. 1. 2. Truth in words, meaning in practice. Only truth to the religion and to the initiated. It is lawful to act and to speak falsehood to men of another creed. 2. Number 7. Mutual help, watchfulness, and protection. 3. To renounce all other religions. 4. To be separate from infidels of every kind, not externally, but only in heart. 5. 1. Recognize God's eternal unity. 6. 5. Satisfied with God's acts. 7. 5. Resigned to God's will. As will be seen, the only expose in the above is that they are that of the great ignorance, perhaps malice, of the writers who, like Sylvester de Sacy, undertake to enlighten the world upon matters concerning which they know nothing. Chastity, honesty, meekness, and mercy are thus the 4 theological virtues of all Druses, besides several others demanded from the initiates. Murder, theft, cruelty, covetousness, slander, the 5 sins, to which several other sins are added in the sacred tablets, but which we must abstain from giving. The morality of the Druses is strict and uncompromising. Nothing can tempt one of these Lebanon Unitarians to go astray from what he is taught to consider his duty. Their ritual being unknown to outsiders, their would-be historians have hitherto denied them one. Their Thursday meetings are open to all, but no interloper has ever participated in the rites of initiation, which take place occasionally on Fridays in the greatest secrecy. Women are admitted to them as well as men, and they play a part of great importance at the initiation of men. The probation, unless some extraordinary exception is made, is long and severe. Once, in a certain period of time, a solemn ceremony takes place, during which all the elders and the initiates of the highest 2 degrees, start out for a pilgrimage of several days to a certain place in the mountains. They meet within the safe precincts of a monastery, said to have been erected during the earliest times of the Christian era. Outwardly, one sees but old ruins of a once grand edifice, used, says the legends, by some Gnostic sects as a place of worship during the religious persecutions. The ruins above ground, however, are but a convenient mask. The subterranean chapel, halls, and cells, covering an area of ground far greater than the upper building, while the richness of ornamentation, the beauty of the ancient sculptures, and the gold and silver vessels in this sacred resort appear like a dream of glory, according to the expression of an initiate. As the lamaseries of Mongolia and Tibet are visited upon grand occasions by the holy shadow of Lord Buddha, so here, during the ceremonial, appears the resplendent, ethereal forms of Hamsa, the Blessed, which instructs the faithful. The most extraordinary feats of what would be termed magic take place during the several nights that the convocation lasts, and one of the greatest mysteries, faithful copy of the past, is accomplished within the discreet bosom of our Mother Earth. Not an echo, nor the faintest sound, not a glimmer of light betrays without a grand secret of the initiates. Hamsa, like Jesus, was a mortal man. Yet, Hamsa and Christos are synonymous terms as to their inner and hidden meaning. Both are symbols of the nous, the divine and higher soul of man, his spirit. The doctrine taught by the Druses on that particular question of the duality of spiritual man, consisting of one soul mortal and another immortal, is identical with that of the Gnostics, the older Greek philosophers, and other initiates. Outside the East, we have met one initiate, and only one, who, for some reasons best known to himself, does not make a secret of his initiation into the Brotherhood of Lebanon. It is the learned traveler and artist, Professor A.L. Rawson of New York City. This gentleman has passed many years in the East, 4 times visited Palestine, and has traveled to Mecca. It is safe to say that he has a priceless store of facts about the beginnings of the Christian Church, which none but one who had free access to repositories closed against the ordinary traveler could have collected. Professor Rawson, with the true devotion of a man of science, noted down every important discovery he made in the Palestinian libraries, and every precious fact orally communicated to him by the mystics he encountered, and someday they will see the light. He has most obligingly sent us the following communication, which, as the reader will perceive, fully corroborates what is above written from our personal experience about the strange fraternity incorrectly stylized the Druses. 34 Bond Street, New York, June 6, 1877. That's an interesting date. Your note asking me to give you an account of my initiation into a secret order among the people commonly known as Druses in Mount Lebanon was received this morning. I took, as you are fully aware, an obligation at that time to conceal within my own memory the greater part of the mysteries, with the most interesting part of the instructions, so that what is left may not be of any service to the public. Such information as I can rightfully give you are welcome to have and use as you may have occasion. The probation in my case was, by special dispensation, made 1 month, during which time I was shadowed by a priest who served as my cook, guide, interpreter, and general servant, that he might be able to testify to the fact of my having strictly conformed to the rules in diet, ablutions, and other matters. He was also my instructor in the text of the ritual, which we recited from time to time for practice, in dialogue or in song, as it may have been. Whenever we happened to be near a Druze village on a Thursday, we attended the open meetings, where men and women assembled for instruction and worship, and to expose to the world, generally, their religious practices. I was never present at a Friday closed meeting before my initiation, nor do I believe anyone else, man or woman, ever was, except by collusion with a priest, and that is not probable, for a false priest forfeits his life. The practical jokers among them sometimes fool a too curious Frank by a sham initiation, especially if such a one is suspected of having some connection with the missionaries at Beirut or elsewhere. The initiates include both women and men, and the ceremonies are of so peculiar a nature that both sexes are required to assist in the ritual and work. The furniture of the prayer house and of the vision chamber is simple, and, except for convenience, may consist of but a strip of carpet. In the grey hall, the place never named, and is underground, not far from Bayat-ed-Din, there are some rich decorations and valuable pieces of ancient furniture, the work of Arab silversmiths 5 or 6 centuries ago, inscribed and dated. The day of initiation must be a continual fast from daylight to sunset in winter, or 6 o'clock in summer, and the ceremony is from the beginning to end a series of trials and temptations calculated to test the endurance of the candidate under physical and mental pressure. It is seldom that any but the young man or woman succeeds in winning all the prizes, since nature will sometimes exert itself in spite of the most stubborn will, and the neophyte fail of passing some of the tests. In such a case the probation is extended another year, when another trial is had. Among other tests of the neophyte's self-control are the following: choice pieces of cooked meat, savory soup, pillau, and other appetizing dishes with sherbet, coffee, wine, and water are set, as if accidentally, in his way, and he is left alone for a time with the tempting things. To a hungry and fainting soul the trial is severe, but a more difficult ordeal is when the 7 priestesses retire, all but one, the youngest and prettiest, and the door is closed and barred on the outside, after warning the candidate that he will be left to his reflections for half an hour. Wearied by the long-continued ceremonial, weak with hunger, parched with thirst, and a sweet reaction coming after the tremendous strain to keep his animal nature in subjection, this moment of privacy and of temptation is brimful of peril. The beautiful young Vestal, timidly approaching, and with glances which lead a double magnetic allurement to her words, begs him in low tones to bless her. Woe to him if he does. 100 eyes see him from secret peepholes, and only to the ignorant neophyte is there the appearance of concealment and opportunity. There is no infidelity, idolatry, or other really bad feature in the system. They have relics of what was once a grand form of nature worship, which has been contracted under a despotism into a secret order, hidden from the light of day, and exposed only in the smoky glare of a few burning lamps in some damp cave or chapel underground. The chief tenets of their religious teachings are comprised in 7 tablets, which are these, to state them in general terms: the unity of God, or the infinite oneness of deity; the essential excellence of truth; the law of toleration as to all men and women in opinion; respect for all men and women as to character and conduct; entire submission to God's decrees as to fate; chastity of body, mind, and soul; mutual help under all conditions. These tenets are not printed or written. Another set is printed or written to mislead the unwary, but with these we are not concerned. The chief results of the initiation seem to be a kind of mental illusion or sleepwalking, in which the neophyte saw, or thought he saw, the images of people who were known to be absent, and in some cases thousands of miles away. I thought, or perhaps it was my mind at work, I saw friends and relatives that I knew at the time were in New York State, while I was then in Lebanon. How these results were produced I cannot say. They appeared in a dark room, when the guide was talking, the company singing in the next chamber, and near the close of the day, when I was tired out with fasting, walking, talking, singing, robing, unrobing, seeing a great many people in various conditions as to dress and undress, and with great mental strain in resisting sudden physical manifestations that result from the appetites when they overcome the will, and in paying close attention to the passing scenes, hoping to remember them, so that I may have been unfit to judge of any new and surprising phenomena, and more especially of those apparently magical appearances which have always excited my suspicion and distrust. I know the various uses of the magic lantern and other apparatus, and took care to examine the room where the visions appeared to me the same evening. and the next day, and several times afterwards, and knew that, in my case, there was no use made of any machinery or other means besides the voice of the guide and instructor. On several occasions afterwards, when at a great distance from the chamber, the same or similar visions were produced, as, for instance, in Hornstein's hotel at Jerusalem. A daughter-in-law of a well-known Jewish merchant in Jerusalem is an initiated sister, and can produce the visions almost at will on anyone who will live strictly according to the rules of the order for a few weeks, more or less, according to the nature, as gross or refined. I am quite safe in saying that the initiation is so peculiar that it could not be printed so as to instruct one who had not been worked through the chamber. So it would be even more impossible to make an exposé of them than of the Freemasons. The real secrets are acted and not spoken, and require several initiated persons to assist in the work. It is not necessary for me to say how some of the notions of that people seem to perpetuate certain beliefs of the ancient Greeks, as, for instance, the idea that a man has two souls, and many others. For you probably were made familiar with them in your passage through the upper and lower chamber. If I am mistaken in supposing you an initiate, please excuse me. I am aware that the closest friends often conceal that sacred secret from each other, and even husband and wife may live, as I was informed in Dair el-Kamar, was the fact in one family there, for 20 years together, and yet neither know anything of the initiation of the other. You, undoubtedly, have good reason for keeping your own counsel. Yours truly, A. L. Rawson. Before we close the subject, we may add that if a stranger asks for admission to a Thursday meeting, he will never be refused. Only, if he is a Christian, the Okau will open a Bible and read from it, and if a Mohammedan, he will hear a few chapters of the Quran, and the ceremony will end with this. They will wait until he is gone, and then, shutting well the doors of the convent, take to their own rites and books, passing for this purpose into their subterranean sanctuaries. The Druses remain, even more than the Jews, a peculiar people, says Colonel Churchill, one of the few fair and strictly impartial writers. They marry within their own race, they rarely, if ever, converted, they adhere tenaciously to their traditions, and they baffle all efforts to discover their cherished secrets. The bad name of that caliph, whom they claim as their founder, is fairly compensated by the pure lives of many whom they honor as saints, and by the heroism of their feudal leaders. And yet, the Druses may be said to belong to one of the least esoteric of secret societies. There are others far more powerful and learned, the existence of which is not even suspected in Europe. There are many branches belonging to the great Mother Lodge, which, mixed up with certain communities, may be termed secret sects within other sects. One of them is a sect commonly known as that of Laghana Sastra. It reckons several thousand adepts who are scattered about in small groups in the south of the Deccan, India. In the popular superstition, this sect is dreaded on account of its great reputation for magic and sorcery. The Brahmins accuse its members of atheism and sacrilege, for none of them will consent to recognize the authority of either the Vedas or Manu, except so far as they conform to the versions in their possession, and which they maintain are professedly the only original texts. The Laghana Sastra have neither temples nor priests, but twice a month every member of the community has to absent himself from home for 3 days. Popular rumor, originated among their women, ascribes such absences to pilgrimages performed to their places of fortnightly resort, in some secluded mountainous spot, unknown and inaccessible to other sects, hidden far from sight among the luxurious vegetation of India. They keep their bungalows, which look like small fortresses, encircled as they are by lofty and thick walls. These, in their turn, are surrounded by the sacred trees called asanada, and in Tamil, arasamaram. These are the sacred groves, the originals of those of Egypt and Greece, whose initiates are also built their temples within such groves, inaccessible to the profane. It will not be found without interest to see what Mr. John Yarker, Jr. has to say on some modern societies among the Orientals. The nearest resemblance to the Brahmanical mysteries is probably found in the very ancient paths of the dervishes, which are usually governed by 12 officers, the oldest court, superintending the others by right of seniority. Here the master of the court is called sheikh, and has his deputies, caliphs, or successors, of which there may be many, as, for instance, in the brevet degree of a master mason. The order is divided into at least 4 columns, pillars, or degrees. The first step is that of humanity, which supposes attention to the written law and annihilation in the sheikh. The second is that of the path, in which the murid or disciple attains spiritual powers and self-annihilation into the peer or founder of the path. The third stage is called knowledge, and the murid is supposed to become inspired, called annihilation into the prophet. The fourth stage leads him even to God, when he becomes a part of the deity and sees him in all things. The first and second stages have received modern subdivisions as integrity, virtue, temperance, benevolence. After this, the sheikh confers upon him a grade of caliph or honorary master, for in their mystical language, the man must die before the saint can be born. It will be seen that this kind of mysticism is applicable to Christ as founder of a path. To this statement, the author adds the following on the Pektash dervishes, who often initiated the Janissaries. They wear a small marble cube, spotted with blood. Their ceremony is as follows. Before reception, a year's probation is required, during which false secrets are given to test the candidate. He has 2 godfathers, and is divested of all medals, and even clothing. From the wool of a sheep, a cord is made for his neck and a girdle for his loins. He is led into the center of a square room, presented as a slave, and seated upon a large stone with 12 escallops. His arms are crossed upon his breast, his body inclined forward, his right toes extended over his left foot. After various prayers, he is placed in a particular manner, with his hand in a peculiar way in that of the sheikh, who repeats a verse from the Koran. Those who, on giving thee their hand, swear to thee an oath, swear it to God. The hand of God is placed in their hand. Whoever violates this oath will do so to his hurt, and to whoever remains faithful, God will give a magnificent reward. Placing the hand below the chin is the sign, perhaps in memory of the vow. All use the double triangles. The Brahmins inscribe the angles with their trinity, and they possess also the Masonic sign of distress, as used in France. From the very day when the first mystic found the means of communication between the world and the worlds of the invisible host, between the sphere of matter and that of pure spirit, he concluded that to abandon this mysterious science to the profanation of the rabble was to lose it. An abuse of it might lead mankind to speedy destruction. It was like surrounding a group of children with explosive batteries and furnishing them with matches. The first self-made adept initiated but a select few, and kept silence with the multitudes. He recognized his God and felt the being within himself, the Atman, the Self, the mighty Lord and Protector. Once that man knew him as the I Am, the Ego Sum, the Ami, showed his full power to him who could recognize the still small voice. From the days of the primitive man described by the first Vedic poet down to our modern age, there has not been a philosopher worthy of that name who did not carry it in the silent sanctuary of his heart, the grand and mysterious truth. If initiated, he learnt it as a sacred science. If otherwise, then, like Socrates repeating to himself, as well as to his fellow men, the noble injunction, "O man, know thyself," he succeeded in recognizing his God within himself. Ye are gods, the King Psalmist tells us, and we find Jesus reminding the scribes of that expression. ye are gods, was addressed to other mortal men, claiming for himself the same privilege without any blasphemy. And, as a faithful echo, Paul, while asserting that we are all the temples of the living God, cautiously adds that after all of these things are only for the wise, and it is unlawful to speak of them. Therefore, we must accept the reminder and simply remark that even in the tortured and barbarous phraseology of the Codex Nazareus, we detect throughout the same idea. Like an undercurrent, rapid and clear, it runs without mixing its crystalline purity with the muddy and heavy waves of dogmatism. We find it in the Codex as well as in the Vedas, in the Avesta as in the Abhidharma, and in Kapila's Sankhya Sutras, not less than in the fourth Gospel. We cannot attain the kingdom of heaven unless we unite ourselves indissolubly with our Rex Lucis, the Lord of splendor and of light, our immortal God. We must first conquer immortality and take the kingdom of heaven by violence offered to our material selves. The first man is of the earthy, the second man is from heaven. Behold, I show you a mystery, says Paul, 1 Corinthians 15:47. In the religion of Sakyamuni, which learned commentators have delighted so much of late to set down as purely nihilistic, the doctrine of immortality is very clearly defined, notwithstanding the European, or rather Christian, ideas about nirvana. In the sacred Jaina books of Patuna, the dying Gautama Buddha is thus addressed: Arise into nirvana, from this decrepit body into which thou hast been sent. Ascend into thy former abode, O blessed Avatar. This seems to us the very opposite of nihilism. If Gautama is invited to reascend into his former abode, and this abode is nirvana, then it is incontestable that Buddhistic philosophy does not teach final annihilation. As Jesus is alleged to have appeared to his disciples after death, so, to the present day, is Gautama believed to descend from nirvana, and if he has an existence there, then this state cannot be a synonym for annihilation. And that's going to bring us to the end. We will resume on the next one. That is the end of Part 2, Chapter 7, Part 1. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. This is, again, a lot of history. There have been a couple of points that I had to point out. This is not exactly correct, but for the most part, this is just reading through what other people know. It is learning more than it is me explaining. I was really expecting more from this particular series than we have gotten, and I'm hoping that the next one will bring more. We are going to finish this, of course, but so far, there's not a whole lot of real meat in this particular study, and it is what it is. We're still going to finish it. There's still things to learn, just not as much as I would have hoped. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. If it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me talk about in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the comments as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. To the crew,
Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit's Take.
peace.